Welcome to Jerusalem Minute. My name is Josh Hasten, correspondent for JNS. I am here in Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the state of Israel and the Jewish people, with my friend Alex Traiman, the CEO of JNS. How are you, Alex?
Doing well, thank you. Coming off of the Yom HaAtzmaut celebrations here. Had barbecue yesterday. Trying to feel good about what's going on in the state of Israel.
Yeah, it was, I think, an unprecedented Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day, and then Yom HaAtzmaut, Independence Day. There was somewhat of a lack of happiness. Normally, it's Yom HaAtzmaut, Independence Day, happiest day of the year. A little bit toned down, and the official state ceremony is a little bit toned down from what I saw amongst my friends and whatnot. And then, of course, Yom HaZikaron, the day before. I don't know if it's like this anywhere else in the world. You have Memorial Day and Independence Day, but extremely sad. So many fresh graves this year. Over 1,500 Israelis murdered or killed in service over the last year. So I think this year, I think you honestly say it was unprecedented. I don't think it's like anything we've seen in the 76-year-old history of the modern state of Israel.
Well, I think we've had dark days in the state of Israel, and unfortunately we fought many wars, but certainly since 1973 and the Yom Kippur War, we haven't had an event whereby we've lost so many soldiers and so many victims of terrorism in one year. In such a palpable way. And the whole transition from Memorial Day to Independence Day in a 48-hour period is something that is a really unique experience here in Israel. You don't have in the United States. Memorial Day, I think, for a lot of Americans is about commemorating the deaths of people that you didn't know, fighting for something very far away. And like most American holidays, becomes a buy two get one free type of situation. And here in Israel, it's just so visceral because every single person in the country has somebody close to them that has been lost. Either on October 7th, kidnapped or killed, or a soldier, or they have a soldier now that's fighting that's lost their comrades in battle. And it just feels super tense. And 76 years on, we might have thought that we were past the point of having to continue to fight, to live here, to be independent and to be safe and to be stable. And it's clear that Israel is strong, but not totally stable. So even though we're celebrating independence and celebrating the right to defend ourselves, celebrating the right to have an army and to fight for our survival here in the Middle East, but certainly not accomplishing yet the stability that I think most Jews would have hoped that 76 years on we would finally have established.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody in the country at this point that doesn't have at least maybe second or third degree of separation from knowing someone, if not first degree.
Most people have first degree.
Yeah, somebody who was murdered in the October 7th massacre, or somebody who fell fighting for the country. Yesterday, I actually went to the museum, tried to do something meaningful, tone it down a little bit, went to the museum right outside of Jerusalem, commemorating the convoys which brought arms, much-needed arms and supplies into Jerusalem, a besieged city in 1948. So tried to add some meaning in addition to the barbecue. So there was some celebration, but also wanted to make it more meaningful than just standard barbecue.
Usually the Air Force does a really comprehensive flyover, of all Israeli cities. They bring out the old planes, the new planes, and of course this year the Air Force was a little bit busy.
Yeah, for sure.
And so the flyovers were canceled. Of course, Israelis have been watching the flyovers here as part of the Star Wars that have been taking place over the last several months, but we didn't get the celebratory flyover yesterday.
Yeah, that's usually actually my highlight. I love watching the planes and knowing that the Jewish people have an army after 2,000 years. So that was certainly missing. And speaking of arms here in Israel, the biggest story probably, which started last week, was the United States Biden administration embargoing certain arms to Israel. At the same time, Congress is taking action. The House of Representatives is scheduled to vote on a Republican bill that would compel the Biden administration to approve arms sales to Israel. So certain types of munitions, which the Biden administration decided we're not going to give to Israel to use in Rafah. And we'll talk about the situation in Rafah now. IDF troops currently battling in that city. Unfortunately, actually, a soldier was killed, the first soldier killed in Rafah, hopefully the last. But let's break down this whole embargo from the Biden administration and the fact that we know Congress and the American people who they represent are on our side.
Right. So the bombs that we're talking about are 2,000-pound bombs, 1,800-pound bombs, these heavy munitions. Where they could be necessary in an operation like Rafah is in their ability to penetrate deep underground. And let's not forget that Hamas has dug a very elaborate network of tunnels underground, and it is believed that this tunnel network is where the top leadership of Hamas is still hiding. It's probably where many of the hostages are being held, deep underground. And so these are the types of missions that you would need for Rafah. But in addition to Rafah, Israel has diminished its weapons caches since the beginning of the war, and yet there's a looming war with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, and Israel will certainly need these types of heavy weapons for that type of a battle. So even if the United States doesn't want Israel to go into Rafah, what they're doing is hamstringing the defense of the state of Israel against Hezbollah, which is a much more potent and powerful terror force than Hamas ever was in Gaza. So they're really hamstringing the ability of Israel to fight its wars, and they're doing exactly what Hamas, what Hezbollah, and what Iran want, which is to basically to slow down the state of Israel, to tell Israel what it is not allowed to do, and to not replenish the defense capabilities of the state of Israel, essentially weakening Israel's ability to fight the battles. Of course, Prime Minister Netanyahu has said, if you don't give us the weapons, we have other ways to fight, and we will fight with our fingernails if that's what we need to do.
The Prime Minister making it clear that Israel will go at it alone if that is necessary. And this story just came in a few hours ago. Apparently, the Biden administration approved another $1 billion arms transfer to Israel, but he made a distinction between what they call defensive arms systems, such as the Iron Dome and whatnot, and offensive arms. And my problem with this issue is the fact that this whole war is really a defensive war of survival. It's not an offensive war by any stretch of the imagination, but they are distinguishing between these two types of weaponry.
And the United States did an investigation to determine whether any U.S. weapons had been used in violation of international law. And according to their own findings, to date, they have not found that any of the weapons have been used to violate international law. But what they're doing is they are saying that if they will transfer these weapons, there is the possibility that Israel would use those weapons in violation of international law. Well, any country with any military, with any weapon, could use any weapon at any time in violation of international law. However, if Israel has not violated international law the entire time in these last 7 months, is committing to not violate international law, is committing to move civilians out of Rafah, we'll talk a little bit about that later, they're saying they're not going to violate international law. They're trying to be as careful as possible. So, the concept that you could preemptively block Israel from violating international law with its weapons. I mean, Israel has weapons today. Everybody knows what kind of weapons Israel has. They could use weapons to violate international law if that's what they want to do. They specifically want to use these precision-guided weapons in order to limit the damage and not violate international law. And so because of that, you actually have now several congressmen that are saying that the Biden administration is not maintaining the U.S.'s portion of the deal, right? It's an MOU between Israel and the United States, whereby the United States provides military assistance. This is a signed contract. And there is the possibility that certain Republican congressmen that are opposed to what the Biden administration are doing are saying that if the Biden administration does not release these weapons, that the president could actually be impeached over this withholding of arms.
So that makes sense to me. And here we have a situation again where the one and only Jewish state of Israel is put under a microscope when there are conflicts going on all over the world. Yet we are front and center, front page news when it comes to the situation here and the actions taken by the Biden administration. And also, one other thing, ironically, these are, as you mentioned, precision-guided weapons. So are they saying we shouldn't use precision-guided weapons? Should we use weapons that are not precise? I mean, it's pretty ironic and pretty unbelievable that that's really even in the cards there, that they would want us to use less precision by not giving us the arms we need to finish off Hamas once and for all.
This is just the continuation of a string of events that you can piece together, and you can see, exactly what's happening. Several weeks ago on the show, when we discussed the initial sanctioning of lone Israeli settlers, that hadn't been convicted of any crimes in the state of Israel, but because certain NGOs said that these were rabble-rousers in Judea and Samaria, so the United States put sanctions on them. Now, they rolled back what some of those sanctions meant, but that was step one. Step two, they announced that they were going to be sanctioning a specific battalion, the Netzach Yehuda Brigade, which is a religious brigade in the army, saying that specific brigade should not get U.S. weapons because that specific brigade had been involved in counterterrorism activity in Judea and Samaria, and there was one or two incidents that they didn't like, and so therefore the United States was going to make sure that specific battalion would not get access to U.S. weapons or funding, and now you're starting to see again that the United States saying, well, we don't want the IDF to have specific weapons. At the same time, what's going on in the International Court of Justice, where there's an ongoing case against Israel for the crime of genocide. You have the threats of arrest warrants against Prime Minister Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, and others to arrest for war crimes. So all this happening with the implicit permission of the United States of America. So, you can really see what's taking place here. And so it looks like what happened in the very beginning of the war, where the United States put its bear hug around Israel, it was really there to make sure that they would be able to control the process. And now, as Israel continues to push forward, they're saying that they will use every lever that they have at their disposal to make sure that Israel conducts the war the way that they want Israel to conduct the war, which is very different than the total victory that Prime Minister Netanyahu is talking about.
And amidst the talk of embargoes and sanctions against certain individuals in Judea and Samaria, the Biden administration is sending a message that they are willing to give Hamas a reward, essentially, for October the 7th by going back to this whole concept of the two-state solution. So that was another step as well that they took over the last couple of months, bringing that front and center. Now, Rafah, the IDF is currently, at least partially, in the town of Rafah on the border there, where Israel meets Egypt, meets Gaza there. Israel estimates the IDF operation will take around 2 months, and as of now is limited to targeted bombing, which is being carried out in phases. So Israel, we've been talking about this for months, Israel going into Rafah. Now Israel is in Rafah, but it seems like the operation at this point is limited. You had, I think it's 100,000, if not more, so-called civilians who were evacuated, Gazans evacuated from that area, moving further north. And as we've discussed in the past, Hamas is starting to embolden itself, going back to the places that it once was, that Israel took over. And now they're going back towards Northern Gaza and launching rockets even just a few minutes before the show. 2 or 3 rockets launched at Sderot, which are intercepted by Iron Dome. So that part is disheartening, that Hamas is retaking those areas. At the same time, we're hopeful that Israel will go ahead full on in Rafah and take out the final 4 Hamas battalions, which our prime minister said time and time again is a must in order for Israel to win this war.
So we'll talk a little bit in a second about Hamas retaking positions in other parts of Gaza. With regard to Rafah specifically, what the IDF has done is they have divided Rafah up into zones. There's a very precise map of many zones, and what they've done is move tanks already in from the eastern side of Rafah. According to multiple reports, as many as 450,000 civilians, residents, whatever you want to call it, being housed in Rafah have already been given orders to evacuate and have taken those orders to evacuate. So about a third of Rafah has already left, and you've seen limited incursions. And I believe that Israel is going to continue to move in this methodical approach through Rafah, step by step, carefully making sure to extract civilians from the area before proceeding forward. And at a certain point, I think, like you said, it'll take about 2 months for them to get through the entirety of Rafah. But then, of course, what happens, as you mentioned, those that are in Rafah are going to go someplace else. And where are they going to go? And they're going to find whatever places that they can. And we've already seen how Hamas has taken over places that the IDF has gone through, captured, and then moved on to the next place. I think this is natural. This is happening even as the Hamas battalions are being destroyed as as complete fighting units, but there will continue to be rogue terror fighting units throughout the Gaza Strip, and Israel is going to have no choice but to continuously go back and to reconquer these places step by step by step by step. And it could take a year, it could take 2 years, it could take 5 years, honestly. And that's why the IDF is going to have to maintain a strong presence in Gaza for the long haul.
So specifically, IDF Division 98 on Tuesday killed dozens of Hamas terrorists in Jabalia, that's in northern Gaza, in the largest Gaza battle since mid-March, and the largest battle in Jabalia itself since January. Turning back to the Biden administration, this to me sounds like blackmail. Okay, if this is all accurate, this is a report in the Washington Post saying that the Biden administration says they will share key intelligence with Israel about the whereabouts of Hamas leadership in Gaza if Israel agrees not to go ahead with a full-fledged military operation in Rafah. Again, according to the Washington Post, if this is accurate, if this is correct, this is very, very disturbing, maybe even worse than anything we talked about before in terms of sanctions or threats or what have you from the Biden administration. If they know where the Hamas heads are and are withholding that information, dangling that over our heads, saying that perhaps we know where the hostages are, we know where the Hamas leaders are, we're only going to tell you if you don't go into Rafah. Now, I've never seen anything like that before in terms of the U.S.-Israel relationship, if they're really using this as blackmail over us. So, I mean, how much do you know about this Washington Post report?
Well, I think it needs to be understood that a major component of the U.S.-Israel defense relationship is intelligence sharing. And the United States, the state of Israel shares immense amount of intelligence with the United States and other countries on a regular basis. And certainly Israel would expect that the United States would return the favor. So now with regard to this specific report, you have a number of questions. Number one is, has the United States been sharing critical intelligence with Israel until now? Are they saying that they will not continue to do that if Israel goes into Rafah? Or are we learning about new intelligence that the United States has that they are basically saying we will not share with Israel if Israel moves forward in Rafah? And the question is, how detailed is this intelligence information to begin with? You know, what is the United States sitting on? You know, is it going to be enough to warrant Israel slowing down and saying, hey, we won't go into Rafah if you give us the specific information? How good is that information? We don't even know. So there's a lot of questions, and it's very disturbing because it sounds like from the report and what we heard John Kirby and others say, that if they do have this type of intelligence, that's the type of intelligence that could get this war over fast. And so what the United States should be saying is, we've got intelligence, we're going to give it to you. We want you to get back your hostages. We want to get at the senior leadership of Hamas. And if we give you this intelligence, it's going to help you to conclude this war faster. And we want this war to conclude as fast as possible. And I think that Israel would be very open to that, ending this war as fast as possible. But if the United States withholds this information, what they're basically doing is almost guaranteeing that the war is going to take longer and longer than it needs to. So the United States working against its own purposes, right? Basically cutting off its nose to spite its face, so to speak, in order to try to blackmail Israel into conducting the war the way the United States wants it conducted.
Despicable in my opinion. And you mentioned the intelligence sharing. I mean, I don't know who exactly gets credit for the quote, but so many people have said that Israel is the United States' biggest aircraft carrier in the Middle East. I mean, that's how close our bond is and has been for the last 76 years. But unfortunately, we're in this situation where we are being blackmailed. I know the U.S. Population, the people of the United States understand this relationship. They are pro-Israel. If it's 80%, 90%, whatever it is, the United States, as we see in Congress, their representatives, their elected representatives, they get it. They know that there is a side of good and a side of evil. And the United States, the residents, the citizens of the United States are truly on the side of good. And unfortunately, you have the woke in Congress and you have the others. And now, pointing to the Biden administration, those who are going against our interests and their own interests, as you just said.
And we're seeing that the Biden administration is basically coming out and explicitly saying that they don't think that the IDF can defeat Hamas. They think that in any situation that, Hamas will be degraded, but that they will continue to operate inside the Gaza Strip. And so if you don't believe that Hamas should be removed as a military and a political power, well, certainly then you don't want the IDF to go into Rafah, because the reason why Netanyahu wants to go into Rafah is in order to further degrade and remove the capabilities of Hamas to operate as a military and a political entity. So we're starting to see here that the overall goals of the war between the Biden administration and Netanyahu are very different. But it's so important because you have Hezbollah watching, you have Iran watching, you have Palestinian factions, including the Palestinian Authority, watching. If the United States can keep the IDF from accomplishing its goals, if the United States can keep the IDF from defeating Hamas, which is a small, relatively small but powerful but small terror entity, and basically hand Hamas a victory over the massive IDF that's strong and powerful, that is going to send a reverberating message throughout the entire Middle East, and one that I think is going to have major, major consequences in the short term as well as in the long term.
No doubt about it. And there's all this obsession about the day after the war. We're hearing it from the U.S. government spokespeople. Talk about the day after the war. Let us, or help us at least. Don't blackmail us. Help us defeat Hamas first before you start talking about the day after. We will get to that. The prime minister has said time and time again, we will get to that. But first, Hamas has to be defeated. At the same time, there's that numbers game going on, which has been the case from the beginning of the war in terms of civilian casualties. And a lot of the mainstream media and other governments around the world criticizing Israel because of the civilian death toll in Gaza, or the alleged death toll, I should say, right now, because this story just came across here. The UN changes Gazan child civilian death toll. The United Nations now claims that the, quote, fog of war is to blame for a major overstatement of the number of Gazan children who have been killed in the war. It changed the number of children from 13,450 to 7,797, a 42% drop. The UN, however, claims that the total death toll in Gaza has not changed. But anyway, this is a war not only on the battlefield, it's a war of opinions, it's a war of PR, public diplomacy, and we're being misled by the UN, who is most likely using Hamas statistics, claiming that Israel has done much more in terms of creating civilian, specifically in this case, children's civilian deaths since the beginning of the war. And, it's another tool in their war machine, this propaganda against the state of Israel. Netanyahu actually said the other day he thinks it's a 1-to-1 ratio, which is far above and beyond any other conflict in the world in terms of civilian death versus terrorist or combatant death. So Israel is doing much more than any other country, yet we are front and center being accused of all sorts of things, and I don't even want to mention the terms.
So this is a war, again, that was launched by Hamas on October 7th. They brought over 3,000 gunmen across the border and attacked civilians in their homes on the morning, a Saturday morning, on a holiday, murdering men, women, and children, in their bedrooms and burning them alive and raping them and massacring them in every way, specifically targeting our civilians. And then what they wanted is for the IDF to come in and kill as many civilians as possible. That's the reason why they hide their weapons in their tunnels, in residential homes, in mosques, in schools, and in hospitals. And they wanted there to be as high a death toll as possible, because then they would be able to use that death toll to put international pressure on Israel to stop its campaign and get the IDF to stop in its tracks, and that's how Hamas declares victory. So for Hamas, every civilian killed in the Gaza Strip is a strategy. And obviously, the number of the death toll is the important component, and the United Nations and others, they're taking that number from the Gazan Health Ministry. What's the Gazan Health Ministry? Who's the government of Gaza? That's Hamas. The Gazan Health Ministry is an organ of Hamas. And so they've been reporting, the number that they want to report. However much they think that they can get the world to believe has been killed, that's the number that they're going to say has been killed. And now they've been forced to reduce the number by 42%. I mean, that's not like a little rounding error here. That's basically saying that they were doubling the total of people that were killed. And now when you're talking about the number of children, what does that mean, a child, right? So if you have somebody, according to these numbers, a child could be anybody under the age of 19. Okay, but look at who Hamas sends as terrorists. If you have a 16 or a 17-year-old boy with a gun, that's firing at the IDF, is that a child or is that a combatant? Right? So Israel can say we killed a combatant, and the Gazan Health Ministry says, no, you killed a child, right? But that's a fighting adult, okay, that is attacking IDF soldiers with a machine gun, an RPG, with a grenade, whatever it is. So, these numbers are warped, and the idea that we're now learning that, yes, not only has Hamas been fudging these numbers to begin with, but it further brings down, like you said, the rate of combatants to civilians that have been killed. Unprecedented lows. Israel's done more than any other military in the history of modern warfare, and specifically to fight against. This isn't an army. Every single one of the people firing at the IDF looks like a civilian. They're dressed in civilian clothes. They're coming out of every kind of civilian infrastructure possible, and the IDF is doing everything it can to avoid any kind of collateral damage. So this is further proof of the justness of the war to begin with, and the justness of the IDF's morality on the battlefield.
Number one, let's remember that many so-called civilians took part in the October 7th massacre. They weren't officially part of Hamas. They still came over across the border and attacked and murdered and raped and beheaded, did all the things that Hamas did. So I don't see any difference between them. Also, in terms of the age of these people, whether you're 15 in my book or 105, age, it doesn't matter. If you join in a massacre against a civilian population, as Hamas and their supporters did on October the 7th, you are a terrorist and you are fair game in terms of how Israel retaliates. So don't sell me on all these numbers and these phony statistics and whatnot. And again, this is a well-oiled PR machine. This is exactly what Hamas wanted. It's a PR campaign. After they carried out the massacre, you have Hamas supporters denying a massacre took place, even though Hamas had GoPro cams proving it. You have Holocaust deniers in this world, and now you have October 7th deniers or denialists, or whatever you want to call it in this world, and they're using their own people as human shields. The protests on campus, all of this is part of the one great, terrible, but grand, I should say, PR campaign against the state of Israel. Everything is pinpointed, and unfortunately, it looks like this part of the war, a lot of it is in their favor based on what we're seeing around the world. Obviously, we still have friends and whatnot, but But
don't think that that Al Jazeera, CNN, BBC are going to be blasting the headlines, and it's going to spread all over social media that the UN was forced to reduce by 42%.
Never. They're denying it. If you go on Twitter, X, they're denying that this is a true story. I saw it myself. It's, around the clock, denying this, denying that the October 7th massacre took place. I mean, again, Holocaust deniers, that is what, comes to my mind every time when I see these people. We love the Muslims in Gaza who did nothing on October 7th. There were no beheadings. There were no rapes. All this is made up by the Israelis and the Israeli PR propaganda machine. So that's where we are right now. One other story that I want to get to here, I think it's a very difficult topic for some. You had protesters over the last couple of days. There have been protesters since the beginning of the war, organizations and groups who do not believe that Israel should be sending aid to a civilian population which is in enemy territory in the midst of a war. So the other day, there was a group who blocked aid, which came in from the Hebron area, was headed towards Gaza. The group, they call them right-wing protesters, blocked an aid convoy heading to Gaza, spilling the contents. One of the trucks, I guess, caught on fire, whatnot, preventing the goods from reaching their destination. The U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan told reporters it is a total outrage that there are people who are attacking and looting these convoys. So you have that point of view, and then you have the other point of view saying, why in the world would we even begin sending aid to an enemy as they are literally launching rockets, murdering our civilians, holding hostages, 132 hostages still in Gaza? Why in the world should we send them aid? Where do you see the balance in this?
Well, first of all, when you look at that comment, say that it's a total outrage that there are people who are attacking and looting these convoys. So there's no Israelis looting the convoys, okay? There's not one Israeli that's taking goods off the convoys for themselves, okay? So nobody's stealing stuff from these convoys. Nobody wants any of this aid. That's not what's going on here at all. And to the contrary, Hamas loots the convoys. Okay, this is material that's supposed to get to civilians in Gaza, and every time a truck gets inside the strip, Hamas takes control of it, and they take those goods to them for themselves to keep themselves going because they don't care about the civilians in Gaza. But there are hostages inside the Gaza Strip, okay? We don't know how many are alive, but there's over 100 people that are still missing and believed taken hostage in the Gaza Strip. And there are Israelis that think, how can we possibly be facilitating the delivery of humanitarian aid, so-called humanitarian aid, to civilians in Gaza while there are still hostages inside the Gaza Strip? There are Israelis that believe that the Palestinians are Hamas and the Hamas are Palestinians, that Palestinians themselves, if they supported the October 7th attack, if they continue to call for more October 7th attacks, if they're the ones that voted Hamas into power and would vote Hamas into power again, that they are complicit and they don't deserve humanitarian aid. And furthermore, that even if the United States or other countries want to deliver humanitarian aid, that Israel should not be the one responsible to facilitate the delivery of that humanitarian aid, because this is a war and there are two sides. There's Hamas and Israel should not be the one responsible for delivering humanitarian aid to the Palestinian people in Gaza. That should be somebody else. That should be Egypt. That should be any other country and not Israel. But of course, the United States is holding Israel responsible for the delivery of this aid. And I think that it is correct that there would be Israelis that say that this should not happen. And they're protesting. Okay, this is a peaceful form of protest, blocking this aid. You know, we don't see the United States saying that it was outrageous what's going on university campuses with these encampments that are making it unsafe for Jewish students to just walk around on campus or to go into a library and to study for their finals. So here it's like any kind of protest in the United States, especially if it's like a left-wing protest, is fine and protected. But when a right-winger wants to stand up and say, hey, you know, this crosses a line for me, so then the United States says that that's a, quote, total outrage.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for them to talk about the outrageous massacres that are taking place in Africa right now, in the Congo and Sudan and all kinds of places in Africa and around the world, which the U.S. is not obsessed with, not focused on, but of course they're focused on the situation here in Israel. And as you said, Egypt also borders Gaza, and they've fortified that border so that no people cross over, and they haven't done anything in terms of aid. And UNRWA.
That's right. The aid is not coming in now through the Rafah crossing. Egypt is just, they're not facilitating the passage of aid into the Gaza Strip. And nobody's talking about that. Nobody's saying, hey, what's going on? Why aren't the Egyptians facilitating the aid? In the same way where the Egyptians could have opened their border and taken Gazan civilians out, you know, to get them out of harm's way. Nobody talks about that. They just want to pin all the blame for everything that's happening in the Gaza Strip on the state of Israel. You know, the Palestinians themselves, they're the victims here, right? Okay, they're not responsible. Egypt, no, they're not responsible. The only responsible party here is the state of Israel and the United States, the international community, putting their thumb on Israel.
Yeah, as the United Nations, by the way. So just images yesterday of Hamas and the UN. Yeah, indistinguishable between one and another there. Hamas operating out of UN vehicles in UNRWA complexes. Hashtag UNRWA is Hamas. I've seen that all over the place, and I use that myself because I think that's the reality down there in Gaza.
Yeah, we're seeing that. We're seeing people hiding out in UNRWA facilities. UNRWA is Hamas. You know, there were at least a dozen employees of UNRWA that were specifically caught as participating in the October 7th attack. There was probably many more, but were they able to specifically identify a dozen? This is UNRWA is the number one employer in the Gaza Strip, and they work day in and day out with Hamas. So these are organs of Hamas. So the United States the United Nations, by working with UNRWA, is being complicit with Hamas. They take their statistics for the death tolls, and they're just, this is exactly what Hamas has wanted from the beginning. This is how Hamas thought that they could win the war and defeat the state of Israel. And the United States and the international community are playing right into their strategy. Perhaps it was coordinated in advance. You know, I'm not sure, but this is the handicaps that Israel has no choice but to fight with and to fight through. But you know what? The IDF is doing it, right? It sounds like it's terrible, you know, all the things that we laid out, you know, over the last half hour, but the IDF is resolute. They've been incredible on the battlefield, even though we've lost hundreds of soldiers, and it's super painful if you consider how many Hamas terrorists we've taken out, approximately 15,000 terrorists. You know, we've lost about 500, 600 soldiers in that process. It's an incredible ratio, specifically when you consider that this fight is taking place in this highly booby-trapped urban Gazan fighting environment, which is home court, for Hamas. And the IDF just continues to fight incredibly well with incredible successes. So I think somehow lost sometimes in the news and the headlines is just how effective and efficient the IDF's actually been.
These are modern-day superheroes, folks, the brave men and women of the IDF. So continue to have good thoughts and good prayers for our IDF soldiers. Let's continue to pray for our hostages in Gaza. This has been another edition of Jerusalem Minute here from the heart of Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. I'm Josh Hasten with Alex Traiman. Big shout out to Ryan Lifshitz, the man behind the scenes here. Without Ryan, none of this could happen. So continue to watch all of the programming JNS TV offers on YouTube. Go to jns.org for all the latest news, the facts about what's going on here in the state of Israel. Have a great week. Have a safe week, everybody. Thank you so much.